So then, in this chapter, in this lecture, we're going to be talking about how you separate from your physical body. And this is very simple. It's a well-proven fact of the human experience. There's many ways in which this is taught. It's quite straightforward once you know the methods and once you do the practice. Now, because there are so many ways in which you do this, I've really just made this simple and strong by giving you the two most fundamental core practices that you can do. So there's only two things you really need to do. Number one is to learn visual thinking. It's to learn how to look inside your mind as if you were looking at a photo. So you practice this by closing your eyes and then looking as if you were looking at an image. You want to be able to see in your mind an image. So that means what colors are there? What sort of shapes are there? What sort of movements are there? Now, this component of the mind is actually only a small portion of the theory of mind. When we talk about the mind, your experience of the mind, there's a huge range of things that are occurring. So the image component is the important component. The image or the imagination is the important thing for separating from the physical body. Now, just to mention some of the other parts of the mind, you might have dialogue, which is a voice, which is a sound in your mind. And that can occur without actually seeing something, without actually visualizing something. Then there's also experiences of no mind. And there's experiences that's a little bit more tricky to sort of qualify with words, right? That's this sort of more abstract level of the theory of mind. And then there's also the whole range of psychology structures of mind, which is where we get into the mechanisms of the mind, which would be like how you assess yourself, how you brainstorm if there's a problem or a potential disaster that's coming, right? Catastrophizing, or how do you judge other people? How do you project? How do you sort of have impressions? How do you perceive? And that goes on, and really, we don't need to go into any of that. Really, the most important thing is the component of mind, which is visual. It is, what do you see? What can you notice as if you were looking? And you practice this by actually closing your eyes and thinking of an image. If you want to practice this in a very strong and foundational way, what you will do is you'll actually get an image. You can do this on your screen and just look at the image and spend a few moments observing it. What sort of colors are there? What sort of things that are occurring? In fact, let's do this now. Let's bring up an image on the screen. Just take a look at this image and just observe what you can see. Just take a few moments and see what sort of colors are in it. What sort of shapes are in it? And even though it's just an image, what sort of movement do you think there would be? What sort of action would go along with this image? Now, just quickly, close your eyes and see if you can imagine that image again. And just notice how it looks in your mind. See if you can remember the colors, the shapes, the kind of action, the kind of movement that you would imagine would go along with this image. All right, so when you're ready, come on back and we can continue with this. That is just a quick little exercise that we will go into in greater depth later on, but basically that is the image component of your mind, and that's what we're working with. Now, the second technique or foundational process for separating from the physical body. This is where you do something physical with your physical body, and then immediately after you lie down and you imagine yourself doing that same thing. Now, the best way to do this is to do something that's very active. And what I've found through my experiments is that the best action is actually punching the air. So if you sort of go like this and imagine you are boxing the air or punching something really violently, and then immediately you stop and then you lie down and you go, okay, now I'm imagining myself doing that action. Then you'll be starting to get this separation from the physical body. So, of course, you can do this with any action that you've done, and you can do it with multiple actions. So this would be a kind of visualization that you do by lying down with your eyes closed, and then you imagine yourself doing an action that you've already done. And it can be something mundane, it can be something that you've done throughout your day, it can be an action that you remember doing, right? So, for example, if you're a musician, you can imagine yourself playing your instrument. If you work on something else, if you're a laborer or you're a construction worker, you can imagine yourself working, building that house, doing that work. If you like cooking, you can imagine yourself cooking in the kitchen. And you can do this with any action, right? Imagine yourself cleaning your teeth. Imagine yourself just doing anything else that you've done today. And that's the process. Now, this whole thing of, punching the air, being quite violent with the action, and then going straight to lying down, this is the most surefire way of learning that separation, of working with that separation. And if you repeat it, if you go back and forth, then you really can get a strong sense of this. This is where you get into the deep work, right? The other component is, the other factor to remember is, you really want to do that action, right? When you punch the air, you really want to do it violently. You really want to punch hard, right? That is exhausting the physical side of it. You need to exhaust the physical body so that it is completely real to you. It is completely present to you, right? So that's an important component of it. So just take your time over the next day or so, or whenever you find yourself lying down. You can do this in bed at night before you sort of go to sleep to practice it. And this will actually help with your lucid dreaming process, which we will get to in a moment. But you lie down and then you imagine yourself doing that action. And the more conscious you have been with doing that action, the more clear it will be to you. And actually, that's why it's good to practice doing an action that is specifically for this process, because then you're really taking notes, right? You're really thinking, okay, I'm going to have to remember this later on. I'm really going to have to know how this is when I visualize it later on. So, two core components: the ability to see an image in your mind and the ability to imagine yourself doing an action. And we practice those two components by looking at an image and then closing your eyes and then trying to remember as clearly as you can what you saw. And we practice the second one of those by doing a violent act, which is punching the air, and then lying down immediately after and imagining yourself do that action, and then repeating these processes. We repeat it again, again, and again. You do a different image, you do a different thing to look at, you do a different movie or whatever, and you do a different action. It might be punching the air, it might be running on the spot, it might be jumping up and down and doing star jumps, it might be doing your push-ups, it might be cleaning your teeth, it might be cooking in the kitchen. Whatever it is, these are processes that we repeat again and again and again. So that's the beginning. What we'll do in the next chapter is we will do a guided visualization. And this is something that will bring these two techniques together, which will allow you to separate from your physical body. So before you go into that next chapter, just make sure you have a place that is quiet and you are settled down and you can actually spend some time lying down, remaining alert, don't fall asleep. I'll remind you again when we get there. But just make sure you're ready to do the visualization. And this will show you exactly how you apply these two components together. So when you're ready, we'll jump on over into that next chapter, that guided visualization.